Chapter 4, Diet Culture. So first and foremost, diets don't work. We know that calorie restriction backfires. For the millennia of humans being on this earth, for the vast majority of time, we have been programmed to survive through feast and famine. And so when our bodies feel like it's in famine, we turn into survival mode. We actually have increases in cravings. We have a reduced metabolism. We have things that happen to our bodies that fight dieting. So diet culture and diets do not work. They are set up for failure. Many people have heard the statistic that within 2 years, 95% of all dieters have regained the weight loss. And actually at the 5-year mark, that's at 99% of people. And when I'm saying diet, what I'm talking about here is calorie restriction. Let's also include other diets that might not be caloric restriction, but that are avoiding major food groups, like a keto diet where you're avoiding all carbs. So any kind of restriction like that, where you're operating under a restriction or a loss, is set up for failure. And not only does that change our physiology, what happens when we go into that survival mode and how that actually negatively affects our metabolism, but maybe even more importantly is that many people, when they follow a diet program, they might have the willpower to follow it for the first 2 weeks. But typically it wears off and something comes up and they're no longer following the diet, or they followed it for a while and then the weight returns. So what that ends up typically doing from the psychology of it is that a person feels ashamed, they feel like a failure, they lose hope, they distrust themselves, they blame themselves. And all of that psychologically is going to wear a person down and start to erode their ability to understand how to take care of themselves. It's going to further erode their trust in their own body. And again, it's because they've been depending on an externality, a diet, that's going to tell them what to do and when to eat. And those kinds of things backfire. Specifically, what we understand is that, it's not a phrase that's used so much these days, but yo-yo dieting, where you start a diet, you quit, you start another one 6 months later, that actually leads to increased fat percentage. Because typically with dieting, especially severe dieting where there's accelerated weight loss, a lot of what's lost is half muscle and half fat. And then when you quit the diet, typically what's gained back is fat. And so a lot of times when people lose weight, let's say you lose 10 pounds, a lot of times when you quit the diet, you get back not only to your original weight, that 10 pounds, but it's usually a certain percentage more. So maybe you've gained 12 pounds. So that slowly over time leads to an increased fat percentage. Neuropeptide Y is also increased when we're in survival mode, which increases cravings. So that's part of like how the diet thing becomes a negative spiral, is that you start to work against your body. You're having actual hunger, which is an intense thing to try to ignore. You're having increased cravings. There's a lot of things about dieting. It also lowers your fullness messages. So when you do eat, part of you wants to eat even more than you normally would. There are many different things that's going on biologically that set diets up for failure. And then we include again the mental emotional part about shame, blame, failure, and that willpower itself is just simply a limited resource. So what we know too about dieting is that our relationship with food and our relationship to our bodies and our relationship to health is all out of balance really in our modern world. We know that like obesity, diabetes, eating disorder are all on the rise. So we're not at a place where education about food is really the problem. Sometimes the access to healthy food is the problem, but it's much more than that. So diet and the idea of just calories in, calories out, that is completely now debunked. Here's some more examples. Diets increase food obsession and compulsion. They make food the enemy. It promotes disconnection from the body. You know, how many times have you looked on your phone on a certain app that says if you're allowed to have more calories today, or if it's in the budget of calories? So you're looking at an app on your phone rather than listening to your body if you're hungry or not. It makes hunger the enemy. It increases feelings of food scarcity, which can lead to like hoarding and sneaking. And then it increases that sense of personal failure and shame. Here's a quote by Einstein. It's often attributed to Einstein, that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And what I would add to this that's a really important kind of example is, well, actually, we've got a great slide on it in a little bit. But in the 80s, everything was about low fat. In the 2000s, things were about low carb. I mean, dieting and all these things, they just keep getting recycled. So there's a lot of doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. This graphic's it's credited to Ellen Satir. She's actually the originator of intuitive eating. That she wrote that book back in the 90s and is really contributed a lot to this process. So find yourself at any place where you might be in this cycle of a typical dieter. That place where, let's start with, tomorrow I'll do better. So let's say you haven't been on a diet in a while, you're feeling the pressure internally or externally to change your body. Tomorrow I'll do better. So you start a strict diet and exercise program. That leads to hunger, fatigue, deprivation. That leads to obsession with food. At some point, you're going to be either offered something forbidden or you're going to go seek it yourself. You'll eat something that wasn't on plan, which leads to feelings of guilty. And usually guilty, to be honest, this is where we all know it. It's called the fuck it's, which is I've blown it. I'm going to just go ahead and eat whatever I want. You feel some momentary relief because you don't have the oppression of the diet happening. You're in the moment of having some simple pleasures of eating the food that you've wanted and you're no longer hungry. So you feel some relief, but then before long, you start to feel that self-hate, shame, depression of, oh, I've blown it. I've messed up again. What's wrong with me? Okay, tomorrow I'll do better. And this is just a very, very typical downward spiral. Let's talk for a minute about the diet industry. The diet industry in the USA in 2022 is estimated at $175 billion. And that is $470 billion globally. When I first did this presentation back in the early 2000s, I think it was 2003, it was at only 45 billion. So that's about an 8% annual growth that's been happening. And in fact, in 2027, they're expecting it to be around $700 billion in the diet industry. Diet industry includes things from pharmaceuticals, diet apps. I don't think it includes surgeries. That's probably an offshoot like bariatric surgeries, but it includes things like, I don't want to say any brand names, but like supplements that lower your metabolism or at least credited with lowering your metabolism, things like that. And here's a little history on diet culture. We've got 1893 that first came out with thyroid extracts. The 1920s, laxatives. The Master Cleanse is actually something that has been kind of popular, I would say even over the last 20 years. The Hollywood caught on to that. That is the diet that's like lemon juice with a little bit of cayenne, maybe some maple syrup or honey. That started back in the 1940s. It's just these things get recycled, just like bell bottoms. Amphetamines, HCG diet, all these things prior to 1960. Weight Watchers actually came on 1963, which they've renamed it now to, I think, WW. I'm not actually sure what Weight Watchers is called right now. The idea of total fasting in 1964, which these days now people call intermittent fasting. Then throughout the 60s and 70s, there was the beginning of surgical things like the intestinal bypass, jaw wiring, gastric bypass. Fen-phen in the 1990s came around, which actually led to heart complications and is no longer available. In the 90s, we had some people going Atkins and some people going super low fat. And then we got as far as things like the blood type diet in the late 90s. And just, I'm kind of generalizing here, but let's say 2010, where there was like paleo, carnivore diet, the Whole30, keto. It's like, there's the grapefruit diet. There's so many of these diets that have just been cycled in and out throughout the years. There's really nothing new under the sun here. So again, diets don't work. What we know is that people have been having, over the last 150 to 200 years, we're having increase in obesity, diabetes, and eating disorders. And so dieting is not solving the issue. In fact, very specifically, it is making things worse. Eating is meant to be a personal and intuitive activity. And dieting teaches us to depend on these externalities, to depend on rules about what we're allowed to do. And so the more we diet, the less we trust ourselves. And if you're caught in that cycle of thinking the next diet's going to be make the difference, that's what's really giving you like this false sense of security of, oh, I just haven't found the right diet for me. And so we're really here to relearn how to eat. And in the idea of canceling diet culture, there's some new terminology that's out there. One is HAES, an acronym called HAES, which actually stands for Health at Every Size. And the principles of HAES is about size, inclusivity, health enhancement, respectful care, and eating for well-being. What it really drives at with HAES when it first came around was to help it wasn't the only thing, but it was to really help medical providers start to provide people with larger bodies the care that they needed. So that if you had a larger body and you came in with a sinus infection, you were treated for a sinus infection and not told that you needed to lose weight. And so it was really about helping people get the care they need, and also starting to give the example to people that our body size is not a direct relationship to our health. You can't judge somebody's health by their size. There are larger body people running and winning marathons, and there are smaller bodied people that are going to the doctor for cholesterol or blood pressure issues. So body size, although there might be some relationships to health, it's not causative. And there's a lot to be said for starting to make these distinctions and maybe even asking kind of which came first when it comes to things like obesity and whether or not it's actually a cellular metabolic issue that's causing some of these health issues that's typically regarded or related to body size. So these other words, body positivity, body neutrality, body diversity, depending on where you look, they all kind of mean something a little bit different. Body positivity sounds like a good thing, but in truth, there's some gaslighting that can be maybe subconsciously incorporated, or maybe it's kind of like a hidden bias that's incorporated with body positivity. And what I really mean here is, if you have grown up in an environment where you have been taught that your body is not okay, that you are bad or a shameful person because of your body, then I believe it is wrong for me or anyone else to suggest you that you just need to be body positive and say, well, I love myself and I love my body and that's enough. That there's something to be said for being able to shift your own image of your body, but to suggest that that's all that needs to happen for you to change your attitude about your body and not to change the external culture around it, that's insufficient. And to be honest, that's similar to somebody being in an abusive relationship and suggesting to them that they just need to love themselves. That's not fair. That's not appropriate. That's gaslighting. It's actually dangerous. And so the point here is to recognize that we live in a culture that is full of prejudice and shame and a lot of judgment about bodies, and the idea again that you should just love yourself and that's enough. I don't think that's sufficient. So that's a note about body positivity and how to think about that a little bit differently. My preference more is the word body diversity, and that is the idea that we are doing work within ourselves and within our families and within our greater surroundings and culture to start to understand body diversity, and that different sizes are part of just what makes us human in our inner nature, and that our size is not related to our sense of self-worth. So I include body neutrality here also on this list because when a person's going through their own personal process of dealing with body image, maybe self-hate, body dysmorphia, the idea of learning to like yourself can really feel like just too much of a stretch. And so my preference here is the idea of body neutrality. It's a form of, I have a body, it's not good or bad. And there's more that we can say about that in then a few following chapters, especially the one on body image. But body neutrality really just allows us to start to wash away all the other concepts around bodies, good, bad, size, all that things, color, and just get to, I have a body, it's neither good or bad. And that's just one way of starting to kind of open up a new neural pathway towards acceptance. One more thing about health at every size that I like how they highlight it is that its focus is on fitness, not fatness. So again, about being able to get the healthcare that you need, directed towards the symptoms that you have, and not to always be told that you need to lose weight because you've gone in for, let's say, a sprained ankle. That happens all too often in the medical system. And that the encouragement here is to nourish your body and to find movement that feels good for your body. So if you want to participate in canceling diet culture, here are some things that you can do for yourself. You can throw out your scale. Now, coming from an eating disorder background, there can be a lot of obsession and addiction connected to the scale. So starting to get rid of the scale is a really big move. Delete the calorie counting apps and the diet apps on your phone. Cancel your memberships to the different places that help you watch your weight. So much of how those places make their money is that people sign up for these low monthly fees. They do it for 2 weeks and then they quit, but they don't actually cancel it because they're in that guilt trap of thinking, oh, next month I'll do it again. And so that $20, $30 a month just really starts to add up. And so actually going in, canceling your memberships, stop spending your money there. Stop body checking. Body checking is specifically referred to the different ways that you might pat down your body or pinch your body in ways where you check to see if you've gained or lost weight. So it's a really personal thing. Some people feel like they judge a lot by their arms. For other people, it's their bellies, their thighs. For some people, it's a certain way that they stand in the mirror. Maybe it's standing to the side or not. But it's like this body checking. It's waking up, like, is my body okay today? Have I gained or lost weight overnight kind of feeling? And actually, an interesting thing to do if you feel like you've got an addiction to body checking is to cover up your mirrors. You can put a pretty piece of like scarf over the mirror. You can actually paint mirrors, and you test your mirror, but typically a lot of mirrors you can paint on them, and it comes off really easy later with some paint thinner. So it's a nice temporary thing to do to kind of beautify your space, but it helps break that habit because you might be surprised to see how often you actually look in the mirror for affirmation, confirmation of either good or bad judgments about yourself. And so just like getting rid of the mirror, covering it up, turning it around, those are all ways to just like reduce your exposure to the mirror. And what's interesting is I've had clients from time to time talk about one of the side benefits to when they go camping is how there's just no mirrors around. And our ability to have an experience of being in our body experience our bodies from the inside out, just based on our daily life, is such a life-changing experience compared to seeing our reflection and then judging if we're allowed to have a good day or a bad day today. And then the last thing here is about changing your inner talk. And the chapter 8 on mindset goes really deep into inner talk. But inner talk is often automatic. And specifically what I'm talking about here is negative inner talk. And so what you want to start to do is notice how you talk to yourself about your food and about your body, and to come up with some new ways to challenge that talk. You don't want to fight it in a shameful way. You can curiously notice, like, oh, I was talking negatively to myself, and then offer yourself some new thought. And it might just be like, I'm learning to talk to myself differently. To be honest, that's one of the great kind of mediators. Instead of saying, I love myself, or I won't talk to myself mean, it's just like, I'm learning something new. And that's a good kind of middle ground with learning to change inner talk. So here are some experiments that you can also do to make some real changes in life. Delete any social media that is not supportive. What's funny to me is when I first started doing this work in the early 2000s, late 1999, I would say things like get rid of fitness magazines. And certainly if you've got magazines around that are like that, yes, get rid of them. But it's kind of a funny thing to think about. Like that's not really where so much of our media comes anymore, is like magazines. It's Instagram, it's TikTok, it's Facebook, YouTube, those kinds of things. So comb through your social media and check. You'll know if it feels supportive or not. And then specifically replace that with new media that's inspiring and meaningful to you. It can be things that you're curious about, that you're interested in, or that bring you joy. Also go through, get rid of clothes that don't fit. No more saving clothes for when you finally lose the weight. So only have clothes in your closet that feel good and comfortable and supportive to your body as it is now. And here it is again, to cover up your mirrors for a whole week and just spend a whole week noticing what it's like to not have that feedback of, am I okay? Is this allowed? You can choose your clothes based on how they feel to you versus how they look. And finally, some reflections for this chapter. Do you recognize your feelings and sensations of self-abandonment? Name them. When do you minimize yourself for the sake of acceptance? What is the biggest lie I've ever told myself? And who would I be if I was fearless?